Hey, Nathan, it's great to have you back in the studio because we have both been traveling.
That's right. I think your traveling's been a little bit different than mine.
All right, yeah, well, I did go to Hawaii.
Yeah.
But you did get to go to Flagstaff for the Overland Expo, and we're going to be talking about that. So we're going to be talking about the Overland Expo. We're going to be talking about your ride that took you down there, and surprisingly good off-roader.
Very competent little machine.
And you've got a story to tell, which...
I got several stories.
Which, Honda, if you're listening, you may want to walk out of the room at this point. I'd rather have you not listen to this.
Yep.
And I'm going to start with a little bit of racing rant and a little bit of racing trivia. How's that?
Okay, let's do it.
And then, of course, because I was in Hawaii, we were talking about the Tacoma, so we'll finish up on the Tacoma, because I know it's not trucks, Nathan, but it's such an important truck.
It is, and I know a lot of you guys go back and forth between one channel and the other, and I'm sure you're interested in some insight. And he was right there when it was debuted. So
yeah, we have two basic podcasts. We've got this one where we talk about cars, and then Andre and Nathan talk about trucks. And this week, what are you guys talking about? Heavy-duty trucks, right?
Heavy-duty trucks,
yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And there's a lot to talk about with those heavy-duty trucks, too, so I do recommend checking it out.
So if you want to get, both podcasts, go to alltfl.com, or if you're on one of the platforms, that's Talking Trucks. This is Talking Cars. All right, Nathan. So I'm going to start with a little bit of trivia. Well, if you're listening to this, the race has already happened because we're doing a little bit of time travel. But for us, it's about to happen, and that is the 100th anniversary of Le Mans.
The 24 Hours of Le Mans.
The Frenchy ultimate endurance race.
It is a bucket list thing. I have been dying to go all my life.
So I have 3 trivia questions, 2 of which I know the answers to.
Okay.
1 of which I don't.
All right.
All right. I'll give you the first 2,
okay,
and then we'll leave it up to the viewers or listeners to give us the third answer, okay?
Okay.
All right, so the first one, what brand won the first 6 Le Mans? This is from 1924 to 1930. What brand? And
Bentley.
Very good, Nathan. That's where they got the nickname the Bentley Boys.
Yeah, the Bentley Boys, and it had the Bentley blower.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Oh, very, very surprising. All right, here's another trivia question. What car brand has won the most Le Mans, and how many? Ooh. And this is, it's easier than you think if you think about, and this brand actually, I'll give you a hint, this brand didn't get into Le Mans until pretty much later in the game. So they weren't. So that it tells you it's a newer brand. So it's in the 20s, obviously Bentley was around. This brand wasn't around in the 20s. Actually, it wasn't around in the 30s either.
Yeah. So I'm weighing in between Porsche, Mercedes on one side and Ferrari on the other side.
Ooh, it's one of those.
Okay.
Go with your gut.
So I'm going to say...
Go with your first gut instinct.
First gut. I'm going to say Porsche.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm going to say...
How many have they won?
11.
19.
Whoa, I was double digits, though.
All right.
Okay.
Very good, Nathan.
Oh, I love Le Mans. I absolutely do. And there's so much history there. I've actually been to the town of Le Mans, but not during the damn race. And so here I am running up and down and going, well, this must be the Mulsanne, and, whatever. So a lot of cars are actually named for the corners and straights that are at this race. And it's just phenomenal race.
Yeah, and maybe this year Ferrari they came back for the 100th. Maybe they'll actually win it. So by the time you're listening to this, you probably know. We don't know. We're just we're taping this before.
Are you rooting for anybody in particular?
Well, my heart has to go with Ferrari because it's kind of a storied brand, but maybe I'm a big Porsche file too, so maybe Porsche. Who else? What other German brand has won? I think the second most. This is an interesting one.
Well, I think Mercedes.
No. Audi. They've been ruling the roost.
Yeah, Audi did they had like 4 years where they had their they even had a diesel that was like winning and winning and winning and winning. I keep forgetting about that one.
Oh, I have one more trivia question I know the answer to.
Okay.
What was the first Japanese brand to win Le Mans? And it wasn't Toyota, because Toyota came within
Mazda.
Very good.
Yeah.
Dang, you know your stuff, Nathan.
Yeah, that was their 4-rotor, or it was like 6-rotor. It was a rotary, right? And it was just an animal. And they actually made it illegal to race that thing after that because it was so dominant and so capable. And I can't remember. It was like 6-rotor. It was something crazy in terms of its capacity. If you go to YouTube and listen to it, it sounds like no other sports car in the world.
I thought I'd stump you with that one. All right, and here's the one I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
All right, Phil Hill won Le Mans.
Yeah.
He's the only race car driver ever to win the Triple Crown of racing. I don't know what the Triple Crown is. I know Le Mans is one of them, but what are the other two? Could it be Indy?
Indy?
Yeah, that's why I'm asking you guys.
Monaco?
Maybe a Formula One race?
So I was thinking Monaco.
So maybe he won a F1 race, a Le Mans, and Indy. Does that sound right? Yeah, we're guessing at this, but I guess I could Google it, but it's more fun to guess.
It is more fun to guess, and I think trying to think of Phil Hill and actually his racing past. It sounds like Indy makes total sense. That would definitely be one of them. And then, Formula One race. And then the question is which Formula One race. And the biggest one of the biggest ones in the past.
One of the oldest is Monaco.
Yeah, exactly. So let us know. Let us know in the comments. My memory isn't what it used to be.
All right, so now it's time for everybody's fan favorite, a Roman rant. And this isn't really a rant. This is more of a question. So you and I both love motorsports, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and one of our favorite kinds of motorsport is off-roading.
Yeah.
For me, at least. I don't want to...
Oh, well, I love rally raid, and I love rally, and
I love Dakar.
Yeah. Oh, well, Dakars.
So there's this saying, right? And I'm thinking this is not true anymore. I think it may have been true when it was first done, maybe in the 60s, but there's that saying race on Sunday, sell on Monday, right? Yeah. I'm not sure that's true anymore. And I'll give you an example of that. And this has to do with Dakar, right? So, Mini races Dakar every year.
Yeah.
And I love Mini as a brand. But they don't sell an off-roader. And I'm like, why is Mini in Dakar if they don't even sell an off-roader? It just seems like this becomes something that the CEO of the company wants, but it has very little to do with actually selling cars nowadays. I mean, no one's watching Mini win a Dakar, which they haven't, by the way, and then going out and buying one.
They did a couple of years ago.
Right, but not recently.
And in fact, I think they won two in a row.
And the same thing can be said for Audi.
Okay, now Audi I'm going to push to the side for a second there. But with Mini, a couple things. You got to remember your history.
Right.
Mini did win rallies back in the day. They're little tiny Mini.
Yes.
Okay, so they're bringing that back, and that is in itself some cachet for marketing. Remember, it's marketing.
Right.
Second thing is, yes, they do build an off-roader, but it's not really an off-roader.
A Countryman's not an off-roader.
No, but it is built, and if you look, especially at the European ads, they show it in the snow, they show it bouncing around with family, going camping, stuff like that. And when I was at the Overland Expo, which we're going to be talking about later, there were some people who brought some Minis and they put some rooftop tents on them, and they're like, see, so it's kind of an off-roady thing, which it's not, of course. And I should remind you, my friend, that when the original Countryman came out, you and I tried to take it off-road. Do you remember?
I remember when we hit a big rock and we turned around.
It was like a 3-inch rock. No, it was like a 5-inch rock. And we were like, we're done.
We're done, yes.
But we did try to take it off-road.
I think I moved the rock.
It didn't go well. But there's a point to this. And being an owner of a Mini Countryman, which I am, I can tell you, there is a little bit of rally bred goodness in this vehicle.
All right, let me make the business argument for this.
Please.
All right, so I was just in Italy with Alfa Romeo. And that is a brand that has actually won Formula One. And Formula One, by far, is the most expensive form of automotive racing.
I wouldn't deny that.
Right?
Yeah.
It's hundreds of millions. Millions, tens of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions, right? Yeah. And so, Alfa Romeo is in Formula One, and they haven't been exactly dominant or successful. Right?
Not recently, no.
Not recently. In the past they have. And I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't the brand be better served, here's an idea, to actually take that money, and if you wanted to stay within the brand, because Alfa Romeo needs a beautiful car very badly right now because all they have are crossovers and sedans, right? They need like a halo car. So take that hundreds of millions, and instead of, spending it on, traversing the world, racing cars, actually build a halo car. Or, here's a better one, take that money, if you want to go within Stellantis, and use it to develop, let's say, a mid-sized Ram.
Okay, but you've missed a very important point with racing. And this, I actually have some insight because I've worked with racing teams before. The money that's going into even a factory effort isn't all factory money. Very little of it actually is. It's a percentage. A majority of that is coming from outside that team. Everything from the tires, the engine builder, to the guys who are being sponsored.
Right, but
all of that goes
Alfa
into
Romeo,
your hundreds of millions of dollars.
Alfa Romeo is the engine builder. They're the ones investing.
They are the engine builder, but there's a company. There are subcontractors that do that.
So I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think if you're a team, right, you have hundreds of millions of dollars to pay
At your disposal.
But that comes from the people who supply. You're right, the tire manufacturer. But in this case, Alfa Romeo is the engine supplier. They are the money. They are not the team.
No. I get what you're saying, but there's still money that goes into them to produce this, as opposed to them bringing it out of Stellantis.
I don't think so, dude.
No,
I don't think anybody's paying Alfa Romeo, or in this case, Stellantis, anything to be in Formula One. I think they're footing the bill 100%, and I think it's costing them, I'm getting hundreds of millions. And I'll give you another example, okay? Because if once again, if my contention is win on Sunday, sell on Monday, I'll give you a brand that is killing it right now, that as far as I know is doing zero racing.
Okay.
Tesla. Zero advertising, zero racing, and yet they're the most successful EV brand in the world, and they're not out there spending, tens or hundreds, and Mr. Musk is doing that on Twitter, but that's a whole different conversation. But they're not doing it on auto racing, and they're very successful. So I guess my point is, as a fan, I love that Alfa Romeo is racing, but as the business guy in me saying, this no longer makes financial sense, because my feeling is that, like, the CEO of the company is using, right, the CEO gets paid, let's say, I don't know, whatever they get paid, 10, 15, 20 million, which is a pittance compared to what it costs to race. Yeah. Right? And so he's like, well, I want to go to all these races, and I want I want to use it as a way to bring my, and this is maybe a valuable argument, my business partners to these races. So that's another reason that we sponsor this. But I'm saying, if you're a CEO of a company and you've got this, budget, you'd be better off to put it into developing better and I think more interesting cars than into, I'm going to say, spending it on marketing at Formula One or Dakar. As much as I hate to say that, because it's a fan of the sport, I love watching it. But the business guy in me thinks it's just either ego or at this point, momentum.
Yeah, I completely disagree.
Fair, I appreciate that. Yeah. I appreciate your opinion.
And look at history, and I'll put a pin in this. Yeah. If you look at Porsche, back in the day, Porsche was not a very successful company.
True that.
And they had to blow every ounce of their budget in order to go racing in Le Mans.
They almost
went bankrupt
twice.
And by being successful in the racing, they did manage to up their sales and, more importantly, increase their footprint, which was very important. Now, I know what you're saying. I hear you about the, it doesn't make sense if you have such a low sales ledger to spend so much money on racing, even though honestly, I will argue until I'm blue in the face, it's not coming directly out of them entirely. It's only a pittance that's coming out of them. But I will say this. Look at worldwide sales, look at recognition, and the fact that when you say to a car fan, Alfa Romeo, they know it's a racing brand. They know it has a racing history. And when you have that, and then you have a vehicle that you can sell, which, by the way, overseas sells a lot better than it does here, then I think that there is a case for racing. The only question is what type of racing is best. And I guess somebody said, hey, let's go back to Formula One, which is a hell of an effort. A hell of an effort.
Well, and it's not just Alfa Romeo, it's Ford, right? They're going in with
Honda's coming back to Formula One.
Honda's just announced, yeah. I'll come back with two things. First of all, Porsche did almost go bankrupt, and they were saved by the Boxster. And then they were supercharged by the Cayenne, right? Those were the two brands the two.
I'm just specifically referring to the money they put into racing.
No. I'm saying, that's fine. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that the thing that saved Porsche was first the Boxster, and then what supercharged sales was selling the Cayenne. So those were the two cars that really helped. But I would argue that Porsche has built a brand based on the 911, and so maybe it makes a lot more sense for them to go racing. Mini does not have an off-road reputation, right? You see, with Porsche, Le Mans actually lines up with the brand equity, but with the car, it certainly doesn't line up with Mini's brand equity. So that's kind of...
Mini does more than rally racing. They have a whole road series that's overseas.
Sure,
they have a whole
that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, but it does. That's not an international thing. It's sort of localized. I think it's British.
And then can we finish the Alfa Romeo thing?
Please.
So the reason I started thinking about this is I was, with Alfa Romeo in Milan, which is where they're headquartered, and they said something interesting. They said that depending on the car, but between 80 and 90% of their buyers are guys.
Yeah.
And that probably has directly to do with the brand's reputation, right? Because I bet you if you were to ask your wife how many Formula One races Alfa Romeo has won, she probably would be like, how many, what, and what has won? You know what I mean? And so I think if you're trying to sell the Tonale, which is a hybrid crossover, I think to a woman, I think all that racing history means nothing to most women. And not everyone. I don't want to, I don't want to be stereotypical here, but it certainly resonates more with men than with women. So like I say, once again, I'm not sure if that money is being spent wisely. I think they might do better building, like I said, a halo car, or doing more quadrifoglio. I don't know what it would take to sell more cars women in America. They're hoping the Tonale will be more appealing to women as opposed to like 90% men, which is what
this
the
is based
Giulia,
on what they told you,
right? Which is what the Giulia sells to, right?
Yeah.
And the Stelvio right now. It's a very macho brand. Very testosterone heavy.
Yeah.
And that comes from racing. Anyway, you were saying, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. But once again, I want to put a pin in this, and maybe we come back to this one day. But Alfa Romeo is in a transition right now. So are all the brands, or many of the brands at Stellantis. Stellantis came along and they said, if you're losing money, we're going to invest in you. You have 5 years, I believe they said, to turn profit, to make us happy. And if in that time you don't, you're done. And that was Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Dodge, Chrysler, and I think there was one more. And that, they were serious. They're like, this has to happen. There's only a few brands that Stellantis owns that are actually really making money and keeping them afloat. So Alfa Romeo does need to make some changes. I think that one of the things they need to do, which is remarkably important, is build a reliable car. Not for Europe. The European market's very different than the American market. It's got to be able to get 100,000 miles on it trouble-free. It has to be competitive with Toyota and Honda. And it has to be now. You guys came back, both Fiat and Alfa Romeo came back to the United States with really cool little cars and everything else, and everything was looking good, and then left and right they're falling apart. And it's just inexcusable in this market. You can't do that. You have to find a way to make them more reliable, spend that money, I think, make those cars more reliable, challenge everybody once you do, and say, come on, let's see what you got. We're going to show you that we can actually build a proper Italian car that actually lasts.
So let me address that issue. It's a really good issue that you brought up, Nathan. I agree 100% on the reliability. It's like, and it's hilarious how hard it is to turn the brand around. I remember when Fiat came back, first comment we got, fix it again, Tony. Like it was out of the market for 30 years and then immediately back to that. And of course the cars weren't reliable. But here's where I'm coming from. Like some of my favorite brands, two of my favorite brands are Ram and Jeep. And I kind of feel like right now those two brands are financing the rest of Stellantis.
To a certain degree, I think they are.
Okay, maybe I don't know where Peugeot fits in that because
Peugeot does very well overseas.
Right, like I say, it's not in our wheelhouse here in America. And so I'm like, you know what, guys? And this instead of like sucking the money out of those two brands and putting it into Fiat and Alfa Romeo and now Formula One, why don't you put it back, and especially with Jeep, put it back into the brand that's making the money so that you can keep that market dominance. And I think a good example of that is the Bronco. The Bronco just came out of nowhere, and the Jeep is still selling well. The Wrangler is still selling over 200,000 units. But, at some point, I got to think that the Bronco is going to start cutting into that. And
I think it already is a little bit.
And the recent refresh they did was just not enough, right? What they did was they put on a bigger screen.
Changed the front end a little bit.
Changed the front end a little bit and did, I think, one more thing. But, made the seats, I think, electric. But you basically caught up to where the Bronco is. Okay. What you need to do, what had to happen at that refresh, and I love Jeep, is and I think that's because a lot of the money the Jeep's making isn't going back into Jeep, it's going into,
save the other ones. That may be it, but I think Stellantis is playing the long game. I think that they're trying, rather than look at what the immediate, response is to, they know that they're going to keep the Jeep people happy at least for a little while. They know they can keep that going. Same with Ram. And they're going to try to resurrect these other companies while they can and see what happens. And then at the end of it, once they cut the fat and remove it, then they'll be able to reinvest heavily into Jeep. And we do know for a fact that Jeep is about to come out with their all-electric, what was it called, Commander?
Yeah, I know. I saw the Avenger in Europe, which is cool. It's a front-wheel drive.
Yeah, I know. And then they're making an all-wheel drive version of it. That
you think it would sell here? Front-wheel drive Jeep?
Not front-wheel drive, all-wheel drive. But I think all-wheel drive, because that would immediately replace something like a Compass. Just get rid of the Compass, boom, you got this. That type of thing. I think it would be fantastic here if it's all-wheel drive and only offered with all-wheel drive. Forget this front-wheel drive stuff. We're not living in the past. So, anyway, we should. Speaking of Jeep and everything else, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. So behind us is a picture of the new Honda Pilot Trail Sport, which is Honda's offering. And it's interesting because Honda built some of the best off-roader motorcycles,
side-by-sides,
and yet they have no dedicated off-roader trucks. I mean, they're kind of trying with the Ridgeline.
You could argue that in the past they had something when they hooked up with the Isuzu and they built the original Passport, but that was a long time ago and that didn't last very long.
And so they've now come up with this Trail Sport moniker, which is like the off-road version of, and we've seen manufacturers do this, right? And basically what they've done is they've ruggedized the vehicle by putting cladding on it, by making it maybe just a little bit taller. But you had a chance to actually put a Trail Sport through its paces, because what you did was you drove from here all the way to Flagstaff, which is 1,000 miles. It's a long way.
A little bit less than that, but I took a side route as well. I went to Moab, and also to the Grand Canyon.
And the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, the South Rim.
And so, when I saw this unveiled, I was impressed because, for instance, they actually put underbody cladding on it.
Real cladding.
Yeah, which is something.
Armor, not
armor, yeah, like skid plates, and then they put a recovery hook in the front, which is something you don't do if you're just kind of giving it, lipstick.
Well,
because it's expensive.
There are so many vehicles that are doing it. I mean, automakers are finally getting it because they realize, people like a more rugged version, even if they don't go off-road. A really good example of that is the Nissan Pathfinder Rock Creek Edition, which is good. They lifted it a little bit. They put tires on it. They added, I think, a skid plate to it. And it's a more competent vehicle in the rough. But I believe that the Honda is better because it has one really important component added with these tires.
What's that?
The iVTM4. And Tommy and I agree it's one of the best all-wheel drive systems out there. It's extremely
surprisingly good, isn't it? You wouldn't think it'd be that good.
No, I didn't, and I keep getting schooled with this because in the past we had the Passport. Sorry, we had the Passport with this edition with the Passport, and the Passport wasn't
Trail Sport.
Trail Sport. Sorry, got it in my head. But that didn't have very good tires on it, and it didn't have as much armor and everything else. I drove it in the desert, and it was okay. This is better because the tires, these are Continentals, and they're fantastic.
So I'll tell you the internal workings of TFL here. So Nathan was going to go down to the Overland Expo, and so Honda offered to give us a vehicle, and we thought it'd be a great chance to get a long drive. And so thank you for going, Nathan.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
But the plan was to go through Moab and do a little bit of off-roading, and your plan originally was to go on fins and things. Now,
Tommy said no to that.
Yeah, because the boys, Alex and Case, had just come back from taking stubby and fins and things and tearing off the front spoiler.
Right. So there's only 19-degree approach angle. It's just not enough to really do. I mean, the traction and the capability and even the suspension, no problem. It's the front end that I would have screwed up on fins and things.
Yeah, it's got a lot of like these kind of straight down.
Yeah, into the dirt, but also into rock.
Into rock, yeah.
And that's where the issue comes in with your approach angle. And that is exactly what the issue would have been here.
And we've named those obstacles like ass scratcher. So
yeah, butt clencher.
Butt clencher, yeah.
Exactly.
So it really is a good test of approach. And let's face it, this is a family hauler.
Yeah.
And so why they did give it off-road credibility, they didn't necessarily like give it a...
They give it a minor lift.
Exactly.
And it just wasn't enough. And that's fine. So what I did was, now by the way, I slept in this vehicle for 3 days. They actually gave me a blow-up mattress in there, and I lived in it because we wanted to overland. We really wanted to do that. So that's what I did. And I discovered something, Roman, about overlanding. There's one thing that's missing with overlanding.
What is that?
A hotel.
You like the shower.
Yeah, I'm getting old. You know me. I used to love being out in the sky.
Like the shower in the toilet.
I like a hot shower and a soft bed. Anyway,
so instead you decided to take it up Hurrah Pass, which is great. It's perfect for that.
Perfect for that.
So Hurrah Pass is this beautiful pass that goes up kind of into the mountains, and there's some great ledges, but there's also a pretty Honda. If you're listening at this point, Carl, just maybe
cover your ears, my friend.
Yeah, go.
Although I did tell your people what happened. I told the rep what happened, and
you went through this. Tell me about the water crossing.
Okay, so the water crossing. There's various dry riverbeds going through, and we've been on this course before. I've been on it. We've done it several times. We actually recently did it in our Go Large series, where we went way out there and camped and everything in these large SUVs. Anyway, well, recently Moab had a bunch of rain.
Go big.
Go big. I said go big, didn't I?
He said large. Go big. That's okay.
Go big and large. Okay, so anyway, so long story short, riverbed crossing. They recently had a ton of rain, lots of moisture.
Of course, it's
and
spring.
It was the second river. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
And so I see this large lake in front of me, and I'm thinking, I know this thing can waterford easily 2 feet plus, but I don't know how deep this is. And I was watching, there's one ATV that went through there, and I thought, okay, I can do this. So I start easing my way in, and the front end starts to dip a little bit, and I start slowing down. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to take it easy. Maybe I'm going to pull out of here. And as I'm thinking this, a giant side-by-side, huge Polaris goes powering through past me, didn't want to wait, and the bow wake from what he did comes up and over. Not only did it splash over the hood, it actually splashed completely over the windshield. And we're talking about that thick sludge Moab red mud.
So you're starting TFL boat all on your own.
Submarine. It was U-boat.
TFL U-boat.
TFL U-boat. And immediately, the second the water just splashed, engine cuts off. And, the inside of me does this thing, and it was pretty...
getting water into an engine is never good.
It's never good. And I've been there before. I've hydrolocked before, and I'm just thinking, oh, my God, I've just killed this $50,000 car. And what I immediately did is I shut it off because it was trying to restart itself. It shut itself off immediately. And I think that there's a sensor that tells it.
If there's water coming into the moisture, yeah.
So what happened was, so it's like, okay, I've got to... So I crank the hood, get out of the car, and I go, and it's waist-high water and goo, which is very comfortable, by the way, I got to say, and smells great. And I went around, opened the hood, looked in. Fortunately, the intake was almost completely clear, which is great. So I shoved one of my shirts in there just to make sure, way in there to make sure any water or anything I could soak up. Meanwhile, I start cleaning off the battery. At that very moment, this is 2 minutes into my debacle, this guy in this modified monster Jeep says, hey, you want me to pull you out of there? And without missing a beat, I said, yes, please. I didn't want to mess with it. And one thing you do not want to do when you're submerged, or when you might be submerged, is restart your engine until you know that you're, dry.
Yeah, no, for sure. Did he pull you out forward or backward?
Backward.
Yeah,
because there is a hitch or a thing.
In the front, but it's way underneath.
Yeah, and not only that, but I'd have to go even deeper into the water. Oh. And I thought, I don't want to do that. But
luckily, because the Trail Sport has a hitch now, it's got a recovery point. So you just hooks
both
up
in
to
the front and the rear.
Yeah.
So I just hooked up to the hitch, and this guy, I got in. Now, here's the thing. I couldn't put it into neutral. Because it won't start. As it won't start, you can't put it in neutral. There is a way to do a release, but I didn't know it offhand.
Yeah, it's like the Hummer. I had the same problem.
Same exact problem. So this dude with serious torque dragged me out. The front wheels were completely locked, dragged me out of this goo. And there's video that you're going to see on that. I actually have some video footage of that, at least from the inside of the cab. Okay, so he leaves me. He even offered to take me into town, and I thought, I know where some campers are. I actually had a friend who was in the area. I could get out if I needed to. So he leaves, and I leave the hood open. I dry everything off that I can, the battery especially, the whole terminal. I pulled it apart and dried everything. I let it sit for 15 minutes, let the sun do its job, and it fired right up.
That's great. Yeah, because being stuck in Moab. And this was on your way down to the Expo or on your way back?
This is my way down to the Expo.
Oh, so you would have been.
And this is technically day one. It's actually day two. On my way down from Boulder, I stopped over about 3 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning, in Grand Junction. There's an off-road area there, and I pulled in, and that was actually technically my first night sleeping in the Pilot, but I barely, 3 hours or whatever. Second night was here in Moab, and I went to a KOA, and they had a laundry service. Yay! So I was able to use their washer and dryer and take care of it.
What's it like sleeping in? Does it get cold at night?
No, I didn't get that cold, but I had a refrigerator, which worked really well, by the way, and this will be in the video. And unfortunately, I left that thing plugged in to a little power reserve, and as I'm sleeping, it's an actual refrigerator, and it kicked on a few times, which wakes you up and freaks you out. Anyway, sleeping in it wasn't too bad. I actually, lengthwise, and I'm 6'1", with my shoes off, probably 6'1.5", and I fit perfectly in there. Better, more comfortable, by the way, if you go with your head towards the tailgate, I found out later on. Except I kicked, I think, I didn't realize I did this until Zach brought it up to me, and I disfigured a little bit of the center armrest, too. Had no idea I did it. But other than that, the interior is pretty wide. You can put a 4x8 sheet in there if you leave the tailgate up, but it has to be kind of cockeyed to get in there, if you're wondering. Anyway, so then I take it down from there to this place called Back of the Rock, and I do a bunch of off-roading, which is the picture you see behind me if you're able to see it. And that's where I did a whole bunch of off-roading. And the reason I went there, soft sand, which is the one thing we haven't driven in this yet. We've done snow, and we've done the rollers, and we've done the Onyx off-road course, but we haven't done that. So I did a whole bunch of soft sand, performed great. It has a sand setting, which works fantastic. It actually delays the acceleration a little bit and changes the algorithm of the shifting. Worked great. And then from there, I went to South Rim, Grand Canyon, and I got hailed on, thunder and lightning the entire time I tried to camp there. I tried lighting a fire, and you'll see it, the video, there is a fire, and then the rain came and knocked everything out and destroyed my campsite, which was awesome. And then from there, I went to Flagstaff, Arizona, and that's where I met Andre. And we went to the Overland Expo
West. Got rained on again.
Got rained on like crazy. Cats and dogs day one. We were supposed to cover the Toyota Tacoma that day, but it was so gooey that they switched it to the next morning at dawn. So Andre and I got our stuff together and came back the next, 7 o'clock in the morning right there, and with a couple other journalists, and we covered not only the, what's the name of that really expensive version of the Toyota? The
Trail Hunter.
Trail Hunter. But we also did the
Pre-runner.
Pre-runner. And the Pre-runner, that was the official debut. It wasn't there in Hawaii. It was where we were. And that's cool. The Pre-runner, two-door. Two-seat, base model essentially, Toyota Tacoma.
Two-wheel drive.
Two-wheel drive with a rear locker.
So you could do donuts.
Yeah, you could do a lot of things. You can get out of a lot of trouble with that. I probably could have used it. Anyway, so that I met him there. And then once we finished up after a couple days of Overland Expo, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and went to the Dead Dog Trail. And that's where I ended my adventure in the Pilot. And it was flawless other than what I did to it. And I feel terrible for that. But the good news is it survived.
Yeah, so how was it as a road trip or overlanding vehicle, and how was it as an off-roader?
Okay, off-roader, really good, much better than you expect. But here's the most important thing you have to remember.
Let's face it, a lot of people aren't going to be taking a Pilot off-road.
No, they're really not.
No.
But it can
family hauler, basically.
It's a family hauler, but this version of it has the right tires. It's the most important thing that Roman and I have been saying for years, tires. If you really want to do off-roading, it doesn't quite have the height. It needs a little bit more, but you don't want the height if you drive it every day because it gets 24 miles per gallon on the highway if you're
that's
lucky.
Exactly right. You're then Honda's in this pickle, which everybody's in, right? The more you lift it, except for Subaru, they don't seem to care.
No, but they also have a CVT, which is pretty efficient.
Yeah. So you're in this pickle where you can go for off-road or you can go for on-road, but the two aren't basically compatible. You can make it from a fuel economy standpoint, at least.
And that's always been the conundrum for a lot of people out there, that you want a more off-roady version of everything that's out there.
But you put on bigger tires
and a lift, and suddenly aerodynamics and everything else and drag, everything goes out of the window. So this thing does not get great mileage. That is one of the issues.
Unless you're a bro truck guy or gal.
If you're a bro truck, then who cares?
At that point,
everything gets thrown out of the window.
You're in the teens if you're lucky.
But this one, on the road, the tires are a little bit noisy, a little noisier than the regular Pilot, but it handles just like a regular Pilot. Very comfortable ride for the most part. Actually, I mean, the steering's a little numb, but other than that, I think that this is one of the best vehicles in its class that can do almost everything, and it can tow 5,000 pounds. I mean, it's really just a really solid vehicle.
So it's funny, one of the cars that directly competes with, of course, is the Kia Hyundai twins, the Telluride and the Palisade.
Yeah, and I would take this over Telluride, I think.
Yeah, and I remember when the Telluride came out, they actually launched it in Moab and let me take it off-road. Mm-hmm. So also a V6. But that's one where, I'm not going to call it lipsticky, but it has more... It has more, and recently the last version of it, I actually got to take it off road,
and that one had beefier tires.
Yeah. So they did kind of the same thing, and that one's called the Trail X, I think.
X Trail.
X Trail. Yeah, it's got like Trail. That. Yeah, X Trail.
There's an X in it for sure.
Yeah. And I did okay off road, and I appreciate that they're both Honda and Hyundai Kia are doing more off roady stuff, but you run into this question, which I suppose they're asking themselves when we do these podcasts, like how many people are actually going to take these things off road, right? I guess if you're going to have a family, you're going to go camping for sure,
or in snow if you're going to go skiing.
But as a real overlander,
So between the two of them, the Honda First of all, the IVTM4, it can take up to 75% of the torque and send it to the rear axle. Then up to 100% of that torque can go to whichever wheel needs it. And between using braking and the gearing and the rear clutch and everything else that it's going on, it is able to put power everywhere you need it. If you watch Tommy's video, I think which is on off-road, and he puts it on rollers, this is one of the most successful 3-row crossovers we've ever had on rollers.
Yeah, he did. He told me that it did really well.
Yeah.
Really, really well.
Yeah, surprisingly well. So they have the system.
So let me explain the rollers.
Please do.
Yeah, I just don't, in case you guys don't watch TFL, so Tommy does this vehicle test that we've been doing for a number of years now.
4 years, 5 years?
Yeah. So we have these rollers, and he puts the car on, let's say, rollers with the front wheels to see if it can get off the rollers. So,
that is correct.
So basically what happens is the front wheels spin, obviously, in the rollers, so it has to send power to the back. And then if it does send power to the back, it gets itself off the rollers.
All right.
But then it gets interesting, because then you could put it on not 1, not 2, but 3 sets of rollers.
That's right.
And then basically you're seeing if it can get itself off the rollers using only one wheel drive. And that could be the front or in the rear.
Or the rear, right, exactly, which Tommy tests both. It's a very thorough test. And we don't use 4 rollers because obviously that wouldn't work. So in case you were wondering, no, 4 rollers, you're not going to get off that.
Unless it's 6x6.
Yeah, it's a 6x6, or unless you go like 100 miles per hour, destroy the rollers, and then you can bounce up and over. No, this test has been
We've
refined.
done that. We've destroyed the rollers.
We've done that before, yeah.
A lot, yeah.
But the point is that Tommy's refined this test, and now what we do is we do the whole thing at the ranch, and then from the rollers, he'll take it on our off-road course, basically to show in practice how the systems work. And the Honda, and it was the exact same Honda that I drove, did remarkably well there, probably best in class for that. So by me taking it into these other elements that we haven't tested yet, soft sand and apparently water, it was very well behaved and beyond what most people would need with an average crossover that might go on a trail. This one will do it that much better. If you want to go any further than this, then you need to work your way up to something that Jeep builds, or perhaps a Tahoe that's built for off-roading.
Or a truck-based.
Yeah, a truck-based vehicle, because you're no longer you're past the capability level. But this is also $50,000 for this thing. It's pretty pricey for what is basically a Honda family hauler.
So let me ask you, what was the Expo like?
The Expo was fantastic. Every year we go. Now it's interesting. There are a lot of very expensive rigs there, and I agree with you guys. It's like, hey, this sucks. There's so many things that are $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, way out of my reach. But there were a lot of booths there from a lot of upfitters, aftermarket, and whatnot. And some people had some great ideas for average and even cheap or less expensive vehicles. And that was all there on display. And if you couldn't find it at the event, you walked right out to the campsite, which is right there. It's all in Flagstaff. And so many people did these inventive things to their running everyday rigs. It was awesome.
So let me ask you, you did a bunch of videos on a bunch of different vehicles, and those are going to be at all TFL. Is there one that sticks out? One that you were like, wow, this is badass, or this is unique, this is something I haven't seen before?
So Andre and I did a huge walk-around video where I think it was like 40 minutes or 45 minutes of walking around. And at the very
in the rain.
In the rain. Yeah. And some of you guys are saying Nathan was grumpy. Well, because I had already been rained on for 4 days leading up to that, and I was sick that day too. I had a horrible nasal thing, and that was all the rain. Anyway, the point is that yes, I was a little grumpy, but the very first vehicle that was there, it stood out to me, but in a bad way.
Okay.
And you'll see it in the image if you go and look at this video. There's this giant International 6x6 that I'm standing next to, and it makes me look like a tiny little child.
I saw that. You guys look like you were like Lego men next to it.
It had 3 stories, technically. It was insane.
Where can you even take that?
That's exactly one of the problems. Aside from the ridiculous price of this thing, right? It was, I think, $350,000 at least. You can't take it anywhere. You're not overlanding anywhere in this unless you're on some frozen tundra.
Maybe desert or tundra.
Exactly.
That's all there is.
There's the whole thing about overlanding is having the maneuverability and the capability to go to these remote places where a cell phone won't work.
At that point, just get a Prevost, right? One of those like fancy buses.
Well, this thing was even bigger, Roman. It was just so, because it had a third extending story where people were, when Andre and I got there, we actually saw people partying on top of this thing as if they were at a NASCAR race, hanging out, drinking on the top of this. And this thing extended, this roof thing, and then they actually closed it when it started raining. It was ridiculous. And to me, it's just like, this is the ultimate of what I dislike about overlanding. This is everything that's wrong with it.
Well, let's talk about that. And before we go to Tacoma, which is actually a good overlanding, right? Because they have a special one we can talk about that you saw too, the new Trail Hunter. So we'll talk about that. But look, I think, I listened to Scott Brady over at the Overland.
Scott's a great guy.
Yeah. Good guy. He, Overland Journal, and him and Matt Scott, another great guy. They've been around the world, or they've been to a lot of places.
I think they've been around the world.
Right. But usually most overlanders I know who are doing this for real are saving up for years and then have a budget, and that budget per day is not a lot.
No.
We're talking, maybe if you can do it on $25, $50, $75 a day, or even $100, and that includes food and fuel, because that's what you have, right? And that's the kind of overlanding I really admire and look up to. I think buying a $1.5 million Earth Roamer and driving it to I don't know
Baja,
Pebble Beach, wherever you. That's not. Is that overlanding?
That's
just luxury. Rich people camping. Because the romance. I love motorcycles. So to me, some of my favorite overlanding is on motorcycles.
Absolutely.
That just takes everything down to its cleanest and barest element, right? It's in the wind. It's hard, right? You gotta sleep.
Erect a tent if you're lucky to even have
on the side of the road. Yeah,
right.
It makes you feel like you're alive because you're struggling to live.
Yeah,
I don't think an Earth Roamer does that. When you've got like chilled champagne and fluted champagne glasses
and a luxury interior that has goose down sheets.
I'm not trying to pick on Earth Roamer. It's just the most expensive of that breed.
It's one of the top in terms of its overall. And there's so many other ones. You walk around there and you look at these builds and you're just thinking to yourself, my God, what do they do for a living in order to be able to buy this? It must be a retired doctor or whatever.
And I get it. I mean, you're at the Expo, right?
Right.
You're not going to be showing off like a guy on a KLR or a gal on a KLR.
Actually, you are.
Are you?
Yes, because they had a whole motorcycle section.
Okay.
And they had several different guys showing saddlebags and all these other things for their motorcycles. And the thing about overlanding, and this is, yes, I know it's kind of a trendy term, overlanding is camping. Really, the only difference that I see is that camping can be done when you're hiking, so to speak, and I don't consider that overlanding. That's camping. Overlanding to me is getting in a vehicle of some form, everything from a bicycle all the way up to this ridiculous 6x6, and going to a place where you are off the grid and you are forced to use the vehicle or whatever is around you in order to survive for a certain period of time. And that to me is the challenge, and which is why I slept in this Honda, because I lived in it and I changed in it and I ate in it and I cooked out of it.
I apologize to our press lead.
It smells better now. I actually made sure it was disinfected before I was done with it. Yeah, I do apologize for whatever damage was incurred. But for the most part, it survived me, which is saying a lot. Bottom line, though, the Overland Expo had a ton of our fans in there.
Did you get to say hi to some of them?
I'm sorry, did I?
Say hi to someone?
Even on camera. Yeah, quite a few of them.
Yeah, that's great.
And
we love you guys.
Yeah, we really, really, truly do. And we love, come on up and talk to us.
And we love our Patreon supporters. So
Thank
especially
you,
guys.
Patreons. Yes.
And we try to answer your questions, but guys, we get so many questions. It gets overwhelming sometimes. So if we don't get to your question either on the podcast or in real life, we do apologize. It's not that we're trying to ignore you. It's just that between making videos and traveling and producing podcasts and writing websites, it's just a lot.
Considering we have 8 channels, 4 websites, auction site, and all this other stuff, and Roman, I'm sure, is already choosing 5 other things for us to do individually. There's 10 of us at TFL, and all of us have to do multiple juggling. So we sometimes, things do fall through the cracks. It's not you, it's us, and we will do our best to compensate for that. But speaking of compensating.
But we love you guys, especially our Patreon supporters. Thank you for the extra money. It allows us to keep up this crazy schedule.
Right. And by the
do
way,
this podcast.
And if you are a Patreon supporter, we will answer your question directly. And that's including an email back to you and everything else. So keep that in mind.
We'll try.
Well, Andre takes care of all of them. Andre is on it, absolutely on it.
Thank you, Andre.
Yeah, it's better him than me. I would screw it up. Anyway,
so let's go back to trucks and cars.
Yes, because the Toyota Tacoma had its reveal there as well. But here's a quick question before you go there.
Sure.
Why wasn't the Tacoma unveiled at the same time at the Expo as it was in Hawaii with the embargo? Because initially they were supposed to all come out on Friday, and they didn't. Why? I know why.
Why?
because somebody hacked, according to Toyota, somebody hacked in and started putting the images, dozens of images on the internet.
Well, you want to hear that story?
Yeah.
All right, so you guys know what embargo is, right? So Toyota invites us to go not just do the Tacoma, but also the Grand Highlander in Hawaii. And I think that was smart on their part because ostensibly me and Andre went to do the Grand Highlander, the new one. But really, the story for us was the Tacoma, and I think for you too, right? Because it's just a much. But if you want automotive journalists to drive, another car in that very crowded class, it's good to do it in Hawaii.
Yeah, I bet.
So, and there's a video coming, but there's an embargo. So embargo means basically the manufacturer says you can put out your video at this time, or your story, or your TikTok, or whatever, podcast. And that's the reason behind that is to give all the journalists the same chance to be on the playing field at the same time.
Right.
Right? It's fair. And we have this rule, your party, your rules. This is important, Nathan. So their program, their rules.
So we follow it every time.
So the embargo for the Tacoma was Thursday night at 7:30 Hawaii time, which is not a good time, Nathan, because 7:30 Hawaiian time is like midnight in America. In the rest,
depends on where, but
right?
yeah.
But yeah, it's like anywhere from like 11:30 to like 2:30.
Right.
And not a lot of people are up at 2:30.
Right.
So that was a little I mean, once again, their party, their rules. So I'm like, what? That's fine.
Right.
So we got there Monday, and we got rained out. So we did a very wet interview with the chief engineer, Sheldon. Thank you very much, Sheldon.
Sheldon's a good guy.
Oh my God, is he a good guy? That guy knows his trucks inside and out. People in the comments kept saying that you guys were brothers. I think you have a very similar kind of tone to your voice.
You
have a similar attitude. You're both kind of very
And we're both a little bit meaty.
I wasn't going to say that.
It's okay. Sheldon knows he's beefy, and Sheldon, you are my brother from another mother.
But you have that very kind of chill attitude and good voice, and so I think people felt like you guys were very similar. Anyway, so we do that, and then I'm like, hey guys, and you know how you said I go white gorilla? What is that? Whiteback gorilla or silverback? Yeah. So I kind of did a little bit of that. I feel bad about that because I was like, we've got. Here's what happened. So here's what happened, Nathan. When we started this, right, there was Truck Trend, which is Motor Trend's truck channel. There was PickupTrucks.com. And I'm talking like 10 years ago, right? There was Trucks.com, right? All of that is gone.
Yeah,
we're the last ones, specific to truck. We're the last truck publication standing. And the reason that's important is they had invited like 100 journalists, or maybe 50, I don't know. There were a lot of people there, right? But none of them, because there are none, had a specific truck outlet, right? And the way this works is you can be Sophion, who's a good friend of ours.
Yes,
you can be Rady. You could be, I'm just naming YouTubers who are all there now, right? You could be Moto Man, great guy, right?
Yeah.
But these guys don't have necessarily a truck audience.
Right.
They
do specific to truck.
Yeah, but we've spent the last, and you and Andre have done this, so thank you very much, the last 10 years building up a truck audience.
Yeah.
Which is true. People come to TFL Truck for their truck news, and they make their truck buying decision based on yours and Andre's reviews because once again, I don't mean to be critical, but a lot of these people, what they do is they point at cars, not trucks, at cars, right? But we actually take them out and tow with them.
Yeah.
And off-road them, and
the most extensive testing,
right? And this is hard to do and problematic because you can damage things. Yeah. But it gives truck buyers a sense for what the vehicle can do because it gives them.
Yeah.
It's not just opinion; it's actual like numbers put to opinion on the icon.
Visual facts so that you can see on video.
Yeah. Or with the slip test, same thing. So I kind of feel like we've earned our stripes in the truck world by doing this. And so when we got rained out, I went to Connor, who's great, by the way. Thank you, Connor, at Toyota PR. And I was like, hey, I need more time. And I said something, which I'm not usually boastful, but I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. And like I was just listening to the podcast, the Porsche podcast, Spike's car radio, and he was talking about like his numbers on his podcast and how he's #1 in all these countries. And I don't like to do that. That's not my style.
Yeah.
Right. But I was like, hey, our video is going to do more views than many of these other car people combined, and it's the truth. And it did.
It is the truth.
It did. It got like 600,000 views. So we worked very hard. And we did 4 videos because Connor was kind enough to kind of sneak us in between while the other people were. And everybody only had like 45 minutes with the trucks.
Right.
And there were 4 trucks.
Yep.
So that's not a lot, right? So they took us back the next day, snuck us in, and then we did this video where we profiled all 4 trucks. And then that night on Thursday, they were going to do a big luau, and they were going to drive the trucks like on stage.
Yep.
But as always happens, somebody got a hold of the press release, not just the pictures, the press release, and all the pictures, and published it to a forum.
Yep.
Now, I've heard tell, and I don't know if this is true, I've heard tell that the forums are actually trying to crack, and I think this probably is true, trying to crack the media websites. So there's a media website where this stuff is, presented ahead of time, so we can publish it on embargo.
Right, and there's usually passwords and whatnot.
Right, but those passwords could be pretty,
Some of them can be pretty easy.
Yes, yeah, and so
I agree.
And so somebody maybe, and there's actually people having fun with it, trying to break into these things. So maybe somebody cracked it, downloaded the entire press release with all the pictures, and they published it.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden, Toyota's in this bind because they're like, hey, we've got the big luau and the big, all the like the managers are going to be there and the big presentation, but the information's out there, and all the journalists are like, if the information's out there,
then we're losing potential
clicks. Yeah. And so initially they sent an email saying, we're going to go with the plan and do 7:30, and Andrea like, fine, and we had all the videos ready and loaded to go. And then I get this email. It was like 1:30 Hawaii time saying we've moved the embargo from 7:30 to 2. But, we'll leave that up to your discretion. So if you want to publish, we can't stop you from publishing. So I called Zach and I was like, what should we do, Zach? And he's like, somebody's going to publish.
Yep.
And it might as well be us.
Yep.
So we published a video at like 1:35, and then of course Sophion saw that we published, so he followed and published, and it became kind of this free for all.
Yeah. So
that's a long answer to your short question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what happened was we actually had a similar issue over at Overland. Now the vehicles are already out in the public. We've already put out our videos, but Andre and I put together one other video where we compared the Trail Hunter, which is really at the very top of the line.
Yep.
To the pre-runner, which is near the very bottom of the line. It's only like one step above the absolute base model. And the whole purpose of that is showing you the 2 directions that the new Tacoma is going. And 7 o'clock in the morning on Friday, we're going to have access. And we decided to let a lot of the other guys who actually came in from Hawaii, a bunch of them did, including our friend Tim. And we stood back and let them kind of go around and do some shooting. And then we went and started doing our shooting. And everything was going great. Unfortunately, some people aren't aware of the fact that their phone is actually a camera as well. So as we're filming, there's this one guy who was just walking through our shot again and again and again. And,
always.
And had you been there, you would have gone silver back on him as well, which is always fun to watch, by the way. Anyway, so you may notice that in one of our videos, there's one particular guy who's going back and forth and just right in our frame. We did our best to avoid him. But the bottom line is that we got that video. Altogether, I think we have 6 Toyota Tacoma videos out there.
Yeah.
And that's just within the past week.
And they're killing it.
They're killing it. And that's important for you guys to keep in mind. It's one of the most important pickup trucks in its class.
And I just want to apologize. I said, guys pointing at me. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. You're doing more than pointing. Obviously, you're reviewing the car.
Some of them are just pointing. Come on. But some of them are doing a really, really good job, too. Hey, look, I acknowledge that our competitors out there, and we have plenty, some of them are damn good at their jobs.
Oh, hell yeah.
And some of them blow. So I'm just being honest. But for the most part, most of you guys, and you know who you are, kick ass. So anyway, but and you don't have to apologize. Don't worry about that.
All right.
There's a point to this, though.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the product. The Toyota Tacoma is leading and has been leading for years and years, and it will establish the wake in which other trucks must follow. So even though we recently had the Ford Ranger come out, and we just recently had the Nissan Frontier came out 2 years ago with the whole new thing, and then of course very importantly Chevy Colorado and the GMC Canyon, all new. All this stuff is hitting new. As good as those are, the Toyota Tacoma establishes the class. It sets the bar. And I think it set the bar pretty high, especially with the variety and, most importantly, drum roll, 3 pedals, baby, manual transmission option.
I know. Yeah, I said that they kind of went F-150 on the Tacoma, right? Where they're the market leaders. They sell the most, over 200,000 units a year. And, they had, let's be honest, they had GM coming for their launch. They have Ford coming for their launch with the Ranger. GM, of course, the Colorado.
And even Jeep, you could say, to a certain degree.
That's like 60,000 units for the Gladiator. And they not only stood up to them, but they took it to the next level.
Blew me away what they did. I did not expect all of this.
I think Andre said there were up to 8 different trim levels, which is incredible. Four
different powertrains.
One powertrain, 4 different powertrain options.
Powertrains.
Well, so it's all 4-cylinder.
Yeah, but they're all turbo, and then you hybrid at the very top. Yeah. Manual transmission, 8-speed automatic.
I think there's 3 sizes of disc brakes now that you can get.
Discs, all discs, baby.
Yeah.
And then coil springs or leaf springs, depending on the model you get.
Crazy. And then they started with the base model is still there, the SR, right? And then they went one above the TRD. I think Andre said, and he's probably right. Like the TRD Pro is kind of
that is your off-road beast,
right? Whereas the Trail Hunter is more of your overlanding.
Is your overlanding beast? Why are they different? Suspension is one of them. The Trail Hunter uses Old Man Emu, one of my favorite brands, and they don't pay me to say this, by the way, for suspension setups, and it is a compromise like you won't believe.
And ARB.
Yeah, but ARB as well, but the suspension setup alone is enough. The blows, the bumper and stuff. But then you go over and you're looking at Fox with the 2.5, I think it is, over at the TRD. Very different setups, very different types of play when you're going off-road. I cannot wait to drive these.
And they did something I've never seen before, and that is they created a suspension seat, basically a seat with suspension in it.
So cool.
I mean, there are these seats, right, that you see in like pickup trucks or buses.
Porsche has a suspension seat, I believe. A type.
So there are these seats that do it's in one axis, right? So up and down. Well, apparently this is in 3 axis because there's these little shocks in the back, and you can actually pump them up depending on how much suspension you want. So it's supposed to stop you from not only, because let's face it, the suspension, even if it's long arm, can only do so much.
Right.
At some point, you run out of travel.
And then suddenly head toss, and then you're not able to really hold on.
And disconnecting sway bar too, to get rid of the head toss.
Yes, the disconnecting sway bar system, even though it's an independent front suspension.
Yes.
Awesome.
And then the seat with like three axis of suspension.
So that keeps you even more composed as you're doing some hard off-roading. I'm freaking the hell out over all this. So very, very cool stuff. I only wish that Toyota, there are a couple things I kind of wish. First of all, very happy that they kept the styling so it still looks
like a Tacoma,
right, instead of looking like a Tundra, because I don't really like the looks of the Tundra. But they still did a fake hood scoop.
Yes, I asked that question right away, and I thought of you. I channeled my inner Nathan.
I know.
And they keep saying the same thing. It's easier to control the heat because they're very heat sensitive.
Yeah, but it's not a real hood scoop. I know you guys are like, well, wait a minute, you can make it into one. Yes, I know there's a panel, and you can remove the panel, but why didn't they do that from the factory? Why isn't it? Okay.
And then the one that the TRD Sport has that silly front spoiler, which is like
it's huge too.
Like
but they have to maintain their EPA numbers. I know, and the thing is that there's only 9 screws. They're actually very easy to remove. According to a Toyota engineer who was there at my event, takes just a couple minutes.
Was Sheldon there?
Sheldon was there.
Okay,
that's why he and I.
He's great.
Are bros.
Yeah.
You call it
him and Andre.
Whatever.
Yeah, they read-eyed it all the way from Kona to Phoenix, and then drove up to Flagstaff.
Yeah, and then in Flagstaff they got a downpour where the mud was so thick people were losing their shoes. Like the suction. Seriously, like left and right, it was awesome. Some guy in Birkenstocks is like trying to dig his Birkenstocks out of the mud, and I'm like, you should have worn boots. Anyway, but
I'm going to do one more little funny thing here. 2 things actually. First, I got to spend some time with Todd from Everyday Driver.
Oh yeah. So Todd's our old friend. He's hung out with us for
years. From Salt Lake City, and so we had some really great conversations.
Does he still have good hair?
I think he had a hat on. I think you're thinking of his other partner.
No, it's Todd. Todd has good hair.
No,
Todd's the tall guy with the long hair.
No, that's the other guy. What's the other? I can't think of the other
Paul.
guy. Paul. No, Paul wasn't there. Todd, or was Paul there? I get him mixed up. I think Todd was there. Todd is the bald guy, I think.
Okay. No,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now I'm all flustered. Anyway, great guy. Really a wealth of knowledge. But I turned him on to the Prospector, and then he mentioned it in the podcast. So. And these guys are car guys through and through, right?
Yeah,
they are. But even the Prospector is that.
They did a Miata video.
Oh, I know.
They did all the generations of Miata.
Incredible.
It is probably one of the best videos I've seen in that class.
I mean, their videographer is like, it
extraordinary.
makes us look like we're filming on the iPhone, which we are.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, but we turn out a lot of, quantity, and theirs is quality. So that's kind of how it works. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap this up.
There was something else I wanted to say about the Tacoma. Shoot, I forgot. We were talking about the air dam, and then it has recovery hooks, which is, of course, the Tundra.
Yes, well, after the debacle of the Tundra, I think they realized that they needed to keep the hooks.
Yeah.
They're way recessed, though. Did you notice that? They're way in there.
Which is
it's just fine. As long as they're there, that's all I care about.
I know what I was going to say. I was so impressed, and I'm pretty jaded, so I'm not that impressed. I was so impressed by the Tacoma that we want to buy one when it comes out, which is, by the way, is until the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be a while.
And not the TRD Pro or Trail Hunter. I want to get just a base TRD off-road, which isn't a base. It's kind of the middle grade.
But the TRD off-road still gives you the rear locker and
exactly,
a little armor and tires.
The 33-inch tires.
Yeah.
But I know that you've owned a Tacoma.
I loved it.
And I was wondering if any part of you is now kind of
Jones
going to trade in that Santa Cruz for a Tacoma.
It's funny because right after I got the Santa Cruz, that's right when the Chevy came out. That's when the GMC came out, and then of course the Ford comes out. And I'm just looking at these things, going, so great. So I sat in even the base model interior looks good on the new Tacoma because I was inside the pre-runner, and it has that two-tone seat, and the seats are comfortable, and I fit now. And tall people can now fit in a Tacoma and not feel like their legs are all screwed up. I love the fact that they finally fixed that interior and gave it a slightly bigger cab. It's a huge bit of news. With my past with Toyota and how much I adored my Tacoma, except for the fact that my wife hated it.
I got it wrong. Sorry, Paul. It was Paul. Yeah. So, Paul, sorry. You got
I tend to be correct.
You were right.
Just so you know.
Yeah. Sorry, Paul. I didn't mean that.
So, Todd, you have an amazing
head
of hair.
Yeah, Todd, you have incredible hair. And, Paul, your car knowledge is astounding. I feel like I'm a complete schmuck now. But anyway, it was fun seeing the guys there.
So bottom line, though, yes, I would consider getting a Tacoma. The thing is that my car cost me $32,000, and I'll have it paid off within a year. And that's what I don't.
How much do you think that Tacoma is going to cost?
See, I think the base model Tacoma is going to be about 26, and I think this is my guess for like an absolute base model.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to go up to almost $60,000 once you get to the Trail Hunter.
Yeah, I think you're right. Pricing has not been announced yet.
I'm just thinking of the competitors and where they are.
Yeah, so the Ranger Raptor is $57 starting.
Exactly.
And here's the kicker, right? And this is what everybody commented. That's before any dealer shenanigans.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of dealer shenanigans, especially with the TRD and the Trail Hunter.
If that happens to you, go to the internet, go to Yelp, go everywhere you can, and shame these people into the fact that they've done this.
Yeah, at this point,
don't give them your business.
At this point, the only power we have is just don't give in to that, because apparently the manufacturers aren't going to do anything about it.
They're trying in their own limited way, but remember, at the end of the day, they already sold their car.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. But I kind of throw my hands up at that because they throw their hands up, right? They're like, oh, there's nothing we can do.
Ford's trying.
The law is the law.
Ford has been trying.
But every time they say that, another sale to Tesla or Rivian, right? You know that.
I know.
we're okay. You don't want to deal with your dealer network. Sorry, that's a double deal. But Tesla and Rivian and some of the other newer companies, Fisker, right? All these companies are just going to be there waiting to take, your customers' money, and you can just throw up your hands and say, well, there's nothing we can do. Those wacky dealers, it's a free market. And I'm like, yeah, it is. But especially now that, Rivian is selling trucks, right? Because let's face it, the American companies, especially GM, Ford, and, Stellantis is American, but you know what I mean? Yeah. The cash cows are the truck companies. Yeah. And they're coming after your lunch. These guys,
they are indeed.
You better do something about it. I was thinking like and I think the problem is because of COVID and supply chain issues, the dealers are making a ton of money, and all the I heard that like Porsche profits were up 18%. All the car companies are making, and so maybe they're like, hey, short term, it's all right. So maybe people are getting pissed off about the dealership, but we're making so much money, we'll put it on the back burner. But times are changing.
They are, and I still stand by my recommendation of it may cost you a little bit more to get a vehicle licensed from out of state, but it still may save you a lot of money, and it may be worth it just to put your finger in the eye of some of these dealers that are screwing with you within your state. And I've had friends. It shouldn't be that hard. I agree. But it doesn't. But regardless, if it means that you go on a little road trip to get your vehicle, if you're going to save a couple grand or several grand, I say it's worth it. And more importantly, let that dealership know what you did, and let your friends know, and just get the community out there, because the only power you have, the only way you can be an advocate for yourself, is to let the world know, based on, unfortunately, the internet, what's happening with that dealership.
Yeah, we buy a lot of our cars from Johnson's Auto Center
because they don't screw us over.
They don't do dealer markups.
Yeah, and that's why they have our notice. And now See, that's how it works.
Pay it forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. As always, it's been fun.
Yeah.
And we've got a new partnership with, I think it's called AccuAir. They're the company that does, I don't want to say it wrong, they do lifts, and they're trying to get in the Jeep market. And the CEO's coming into the office, and I was going to do a bit of a podcast with them.
Okay.
So hopefully I can do that. And so there may or may not be an addition to this podcast, depending on how time it is. So I don't want to say goodbye, and then we'll put an extra bit of, but there might be an additional very interesting interview at the end of this if we have the time to do it.
All right. Well, you heard it here first, folks. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Be safe out there. And I hope you guys are watching along.
So a year from now, I might be trading in.
No, I'm going to keep it for 2 years at least.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, and then
which is probably smart, because that first year that Tacoma is going to be
exactly. That's exactly.
It'll be hard to get. Yeah.
We'll and see whether or not my wife allows it. So whatever.
Okay, guys. Must be obeyed. Ciao.
See ya.
Hey guys, welcome to this very special edition to our podcast, and I'm sitting here with Mark Turner. Say hi, Mark.
How you doing?
And Mark has had an interesting life. He has spent a lot of his life basically working in the outdoor industry when it comes to Jeeps, now Broncos, Toyotas. So kind of tell me about how you got involved in the aftermarket world, Mark.
Yeah, I really started out really young age. I remember being back at 8 years old, learning how to weld with oxyacetylene, because on a farm in Iowa, you can't go buy new stuff. Everything that you do, you have to manufacture yourself, and you don't really have the good things to manufacture it with, so you're using hodgepodges of things, working on tractors, trying to make something work. Really, that's where you start. I actually built my first go-kart out of the rototiller engine, the hinges off the barn, all that stuff. So I started really beginning a dirt eater type of life from a young age. And I remember watching Ivan Stewart bombing across the desert on TV on Wide World of Sports, and truly that's really where I got my bug, watching Ivan Stewart of all things. And I said, man, someday I'm going to race Baja. This is something I'm going to do, and I just kind of kept thinking that in the back of my mind as I started off in my life.
So. The reason you're on this podcast is because you're now the president of AccuAir, which is a company that some of you may know. But what is interesting about AccuAir is that you're branching off into the off-road space, which I think is brilliant. So basically, you build air suspension systems for Jeeps to go off-roading.
Correct.
I experienced one of those Jeeps at the Moab Easter Jeep Safari when the head of design for Jeep, Mark Allen, installed it in one of his prototypes. And I was like, this is brilliant. Somebody's actually making off-roading more comfortable, because as I get older, I hate to say it, but being more comfortable is almost more important than being more capable. Not that it's not capable, but we had lunch yesterday, and you gave us a Jeep for the summer, so you'll be seeing that a lot in our TFL videos. It's a Wrangler with the AccuAir system. But one of the things you said to me, which was fascinating, was you like solving problems.
Correct.
So what problems are you solving?
So that's really the whole issue. And my entire career in my life has all been about solving problems. Just coming out with a new product isn't just a Me Too situation. When I said I would get into racing.
So you raced Baja.
I did. I actually built my first Baja truck. And actually built it right here in Colorado. It was the first one. Believe it or not, I went 7 whole miles.
On your first race?
My first race. Drove all the way to a Baja race to go 7 miles.
And what broke?
Everything.
7 miles.
So the key to that though is it taught me, honestly, from the very beginning, you have to look at everything, and you have to solve every problem that the vehicle's going to have. So from early on in racing, it really did teach you, like, how do I get there? How do we do this? And so the Baja racing really taught me a lot of that, and it made you look at the suspension. Not only the suspension, what about the motor? What about the transmission? How does it handle? How does it move? Can you stop hitting rocks? Can you when to go fast, when to go slow? It does teach you a lot of that stuff. And actually, my first race I ever won, I won in Laughlin, Nevada, which was great. So then that started off the whole winning scenario. And then as I was building these trucks, people started saying, hey, can you do stuff for me on my vehicles and this, that, and the other? And we're talking about the 90s, so the industry's still pretty early. I started my own off-road store. And that store became something that was like using the aftermarket. And I started getting to know the aftermarket people by doing that store. Was able to sell it, retire for a quick time. Went to Rough Country to help them with their turnaround that they had back in the early 2000s. And now they're monstrous, of course. Left Rough Country, went to Daystar. Took over a little bit of ownership of Daystar and built that up too. So the key to that, but again, every single time, all we were doing was solving problems at every one of these companies. What was our customer base's problem? What was that problem? What was this issue? So fast forward all the way to today. The biggest problem with the Jeep Wrangler is it's a Jeep.
Yeah, it's optimized for off-road.
Exactly. And we want to make something that can be optimized off-road and on-road. But as soon as you lift the vehicle, it creates other issues. So when we decided to do an air suspension, it wasn't just, oh, let's just build an air suspension because we can. It was, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? And
let's face it, a lot of off-roaders have air suspension.
They do.
Land Rover has been doing it for a long time.
Exactly right. And the newer vehicles are more and more, air is becoming more and more. And yeah, some people like to compare it back to the old stuff in the 70s and 80s, but think of technology in the 70s and 80s. Things have come so far ahead. So our very first problem that we wanted to solve with the Jeep was, and we actually went to a whiteboard and said, hey, listen, let's list out the issues that we have, and started writing out the issues. The number one issue with a Jeep once you lift it is you can't get in and out of it. And if you do want to get in and out, you got to put steps on it.
Which tear off the second you take it off road.
That's what happened to me. So my wife said, I need steps. I'm like, all right, that's not a problem. We put steps on. I took it off road and I ripped them right off. Well, now, not only did I just lose $2,000 in steps, I've also got to carry them off the trail so they're in the back of the Jeep.
I've seen a bunch of steps on the trail in Moab. It's surprising how often you run into those.
That's true.
Just laying there.
It's a great trail cleanup situation. Yeah, so you're dragging that thing out. So that was the number one issue. Was not number one, but it was pretty high on the list of entry. My wife has an older dog. She wants to be able to take her dog with her. Well, she couldn't use the Jeep because the dog couldn't get in. But lowering the suspension down for entry and exit, the dog can get in and get out. It's awesome. We also have some people in our family that are getting a little bit older. Same scenario, making it easy to get in and out. So really, again, it's about solving problems. What's another problem you have with the Jeep Wrangler? Well, to be honest, when you are wheeling, there's times that you need to go up a little bit because you want to get high centered or you want to go down a little bit. Yeah. So we created the crawl control. Under 25 miles an hour, you can adjust anything you want on that suspension.
So when he says anything, he means anything. So if you want the Carolina Squad, you can have the Carolina Squad. If you want the anti-Carolina Squad, you can, whatever that's called, you could also go like this, right? So if the vehicle, you can go like this.
But only under 25 miles an hour. Because if you're on a side slope, a side hill.
Exactly. You want to flatten it out.
Yep.
And you can control each wheel individually.
Each wheel individually, front or back individually, or the whole vehicle together.
And we're going to have a video showing all this over at alltfl.com. So if you're curious to see what it looks like, and I can describe it. It's just a little control that you add to the Jeep, basically.
Yep.
And it has an up arrow and a down arrow, and then there's 3 positions. So you can be at your highest, your middle, or your lowest, or you can individually control each of the corners, which is really cool.
And there's an app, too. So within 25 feet of the vehicle, you can control it with the app. So that was the other thing. We wanted to give the people the ability for off-road use. Because like when you go to Cliffhanger in Moab and you're going up that rock after you go through the water, everybody whacks that with the skid plate really hard. We just air up, we drive over it, bring it back down, good to go. And then the other thing that was important to me is I like to tow with my Jeep. I really do. I like to tow my boat around. I want to tow my UTV around when I want to go.
You end up like this.
And every single time I'm like this.
Just Jeep suspension it
just can't hold it because it's designed for certain things.
Off-roading,
right?
Not towing.
Exactly. And then the other problem with squatting the rear is now their stability is gone. It's harder to steer. It's really hard to brake because 80% of the braking is in the front. So we wanted to solve that problem. So basically, you put the trailer on the back. It hits 25 miles an hour, perfectly levels. You're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice.
And then yes, I know it's really fun to do all this, but the other thing too is as soon as you put a lift on a Jeep, you're going to put a winch on it.
Yeah.
You're going to put a bumper on it. You're going to put a rack on it. As soon as you do that, now your 3.5-inch lift kit you just bought is really only a 2-inch lift kit. So now your tires are rubbing. It's looking weird. Not with the AccuAir. You put it on, sets you at 3.5 inches after you hit 25, and it remembers that for life. And if you take it back off, it drops back down. You're back at the 3.5 as well.
Can you lower it on the highway to get better fuel economy?
You can on the JL and JT. You can drop it a 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
So that's what the 1 or the 2 on the settings is, and that's only because we do a thing called FVMSS 126 testing.
Yeah, what's that?
A lot of data. It's really what the OEs use to decide, does a vehicle work within its stability control parameters? We hire a third-party company. We have no control over it whatsoever. We give them the vehicle. They put the outriggers on it. They put all the computers in it. Put a guy in there with a helmet. And they spin that thing down the track. And it has to pass. It has to actually have the same or better than the OE. These all have that. The JK, the JL, and the JT all have those from FVMS 126.
So there's that famous moose test, right? Where you know the Norwegians take a vehicle and then pretend there's a moose, and they do kind of an emergency.
It's exactly what this is.
And often vehicles fail that.
Yep.
And especially if you lift a vehicle, you're more likely to fail that because what you're doing is you're raising the center of gravity.
Exactly right.
To make it much less stable. Great off-road, not so great on-road.
Right.
And so you're saying that you actually do the same kind of testing the manufacturer does so that the vehicle is stable.
Yeah, but it's not actually us. It's a third-party testing facility. Yeah. It's actually done at Jeep's Proving Grounds. They actually take it, they drop it off. We can't, like they take our cameras, they put their little stickers over them so we can't see anything or film anything, and they test it.
That you got to be proud of that because, you know, a lot of the off-road suspension that's out there right now not only doesn't take that into account, it also doesn't take into account, for instance, the geometry of the suspension, right? Correct. And I got to be honest here, you know, we've lifted probably a dozen vehicles over the 12 years we've been doing this, and more often than not, we actually make the ride worse. Especially on-road. Right. You make it better off-road, but you make it worse on-road.
Yeah, the old saying was whatever you do to make it better off-road makes it just as bad on-road. The air suspension corrects all those problems and makes it something you truly can use. I call it the Swiss Army knife of suspension kits. You know, that's what it does. It's just awesome. And a lot of people wonder about durability and things like that. And durability, technology's come so far on air. I mean, I don't think that's a big concern. And there's always something it can't do. Like, honestly, would I take an air suspension and go run Baja in it? No. I mean,
probably wouldn't last.
It wouldn't last. Yeah. But a normal coil spring wouldn't last either. But I mean, there's limitations to everything. But what we're trying to do is solve what we consider were the top 5 issues. And I believe we've really got those, and people are going to do it. And you guys are going to test it. And it's going to be awesome because you guys can do whatever you want. I don't care what you do to that Jeep. I personally hope, I do not care. I personally hope that when I pick that thing up in 6 months, it's got 100,000 miles on it.
A lot of red mud.
Yeah, and you guys are smiling like this. That's my goal. That's my hope. So I want you guys to use this thing. We're putting our vehicle and our suspension to you to do what you think needs to be done to really.
The other cool thing I noticed is now that you've got a compressor, you've got onboard air.
We do.
Which lets you do things like, you know, pump up stuff like tires.
Yep.
Or if you're into air lockers, you could also use that for your ARB air locker, right?
Yep. You no longer need an onboard air system because you have an onboard air system. You can even add.
Because a lot of people bring scuba tanks.
They do, and you don't need to do that anymore. This is everything you need, and you can even air up your personal, you know, flotation stuff. If you want to take your paddleboard somewhere, you can air it up now. Could you imagine doing that in the Rubicon? Get to the top of a Rubicon. I'm serious. You got the lakes up there. Why not have a paddleboard
it's true,
and cruise around? How fun would that be?
That would be a lot of fun.
But now you can do it because you can roll it up, put it in the Jeep. And that's, you know, one more thing, too. When the vehicle's parked, you can adjust it. I'm just thinking
that water's pretty cold, and I'm very bad at paddleboarding. Tommy's good at it. I always fall in.
Well, if Tommy goes, just make sure he falls in. Okay. So that's the idea. But yeah, even if you're camping, you can actually level the air suspension at night so you can sleep perfectly level, and you're good to go.
So let me ask you this. How big is that? One of the things I've noticed with OEM stuff, right, is it's very slow, right? We always try to do videos showing that it's got air suspension and we're always sitting there waiting and it's like, But I noticed with this Jeep, it just goes, boom.
Yep.
You know, it drops down quickly and it raises quickly. Why is that? Is that because you have a bigger tank or a bigger compressor?
It's a bigger tank, but the airlines are different. Okay. And that's really the key because it's just like anything with volume. The bigger it is, the faster you can move it. So the tank is designed for the airlines and the airlines are designed for the actual air suspension. So all 3 things have to work together, and that's what creates the fast motion. And it does move incredibly fast.
Yeah, which is great because it's also kind of a flex, right? You
It
can
is.
show off.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have.
Have you wheeled it in Moab, and how does it wheel?
I've wheeled it a lot.
Okay.
I tell you, I have a JT.
Yeah. So the suspension's good for the JL, JK, and JT, right?
Yep.
Those three Jeeps.
Those three Jeeps in every configuration. If you got a 392, if you got a diesel, you got everything else. Like your Jeep, since it's the e-torque, the actual tank itself, just for air, the compressor and everything's still under the Jeep, so all the noise is down below, but the tank's inside. But if you had a normal Jeep, like the 2-liter or just the V6, the actual air tank is underneath the Jeep. So there's a couple different models per se, but yeah, it fits in every single application of Jeep every single Jeep that's
so
out
for
there.
all non-Jeep people, the JL is the current Wrangler.
Yep.
The JK is the previous generation.
Yep. Started 2007.
Yeah, so it's a lot of years of Wrangler that this works on.
Yep.
And how much does it cost?
The kit's $7,000.
Okay.
And at first, some people might say, "Oh my God, $7,000!" But
it's a lot of money.
It is, but if you start going the back way of subtracting it, the first thing you don't need is steps. Take $2,000 off. You also don't need an onboard air.
$3,000 if you're going to break them off and then.
Exactly right, and then drag them back off the trail, and then you got the dump fee on top of that, so that's another $12.
Okay.
But then take your onboard air. That's another $1,000. So you save. So really, you've already got $3,000.
Don't need a scuba tank.
Exactly right, and the fact that you can get in any garage you want, you can put any load you want in it, and it just solves all those problems. And in reality, it's only $3,500 because you're going to take all these other things.
It does
off.
increase towing capacity, right?
It really does. Yep.
Does it increase capacity?
We designed the suspension to work with the OE standards,
Which is, I think, a JL is like 5,000.
it is.
It's max. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But it'll meet or exceed.
Okay.
We don't suggest it, of course.
So that's for the kit. And where can they buy it?
They can buy it anywhere. You can go to your local off-road shop.
Okay,
they can go to Acura.com and buy it. And a lot of guys will ask, can you install this yourself? And you can. We actually had a guy in New Jersey do it in a parking garage.
Yeah, why not?
So it can be done.
You got the tools.
It took him 18 hours in a parking garage by himself.
And a lot of explaining.
Exactly. And it's really, the biggest issue with it is there's just more components. You're still, just like any other normal lift kit you put on, it has control arms, track bars, and the airbags go in like the coils. They do bolt in, but there's no cutting, there's no drilling.
Who do you use for your shocks?
We actually use JRI shocks.
Okay.
And JRI shocks are specially tuned to go with these bags. And the JRI, as you guys know, are F1 guys. They make an F1 shocks, NASCAR shocks, military shocks. These guys make a lot of stuff.
Billet.
They do.
Yeah, they're really beautiful. I saw them under there.
That's good. And they're high quality shocks. Yeah. They really are.
So 7,000, and then how much would a shop, if you don't want to do it yourself, usually charge to install it? Depends, right?
It depends on the shop. It really does. It depends. If you go to somebody that does air, because they're used to running a lot of lines all the time, and the lines aren't hard. They're all push-in style fittings, but it is double work because you do have to now run air lines, whereas before you'd be done. And that's where the time comes in. And putting a regulator inside the vehicle. But you want the air regulator to be able to air up your tires and air up all your other stuff.
Yeah, and I noticed it's, and like I said, go to All TFL if you want to see where all these bits are at. But the tank is really mounted to the sports bar.
It is.
And then the compressor is underneath the Jeep. Yeah.
So we keep the noise away.
Well, yeah, because there is noise, but it depends how much you're using it, right? So,
right.
So if you're doing.
Yeah, if you're jumping it around, it's going to make some noise. But realistically, it's not that bad.
And it's cool because you can kind of have a lowrider Jeep.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And then you can have a high rider Jeep, or you can have just a highway driver Jeep.
Exactly right.
So what's your favorite part of the suspension? You've got it on your Jeep, I take it.
My favorite, honestly, my personal favorite is the towing.
Okay.
To me, it's everything because I like the ability to throw the boat on the back and go wherever I want to go and not have to worry.
Not blind oncoming traffic.
Exactly right, and also be able to stop.
Yeah.
To me, that's a big issue because, as you guys know, I mean, it's one of those things. It's all about putting it all together. And if you ask my wife what her favorite is, it's the entry exit because it's so easy to jump in and out of the Jeep.
Now, of course, Bronco has come back from the dead. Are you guys working on a Bronco suspension?
We are.
Must be a little bit more. It must be more difficult because now we're talking about independent suspension versus solid axles. That's got to be trickier.
It's all about geometry. Yeah. It's all about everything else. The thing is, if you think about the Jeep, we've been working on this Jeep kit for years. It wasn't something we did in like 2 months. This thing took years to do. The Bronco, same thing. We're about a year and a half into it, and by the end of the year, we'll have it out.
Okay, Tacoma.
Tacoma is our favorite project coming up.
Okay,
so
that's also coming.
We're very excited about Tacoma as well.
Yeah, because not only is the current one been around forever.
Yep.
Sorry, guys. It's true.
Yeah, that's right.
But now that the new Tacoma has been introduced, usually the way that introduction cadence works is a year after there's a new Tacoma. A year after a new Tacoma, there's a new 4Runner. So we should be seeing that as well.
Yep. Should be fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. Well, Mark, I'm very grateful that you not only gave us a Jeep to spend some time with and test out, but that you actually came out here to Colorado to show off this product. And I think it shows just how much you stand by the product, right?
Yeah.
That you're willing to actually come here and not just like, here's a Jeep, go at it. And actually, you yourself are here showing us and telling us how this stuff works.
Yeah, I think really the key to it too is that a lot of companies tend to forget that they're entrepreneurs. They tend to forget that they're actually people that do it. I mean, I own 2 Jeeps. My CEO owns a Jeep. The guys on the board own Jeeps. My COO is a Jeep guy. It's like we're not doing this just because we're a business. We're doing this because we're enthusiasts. And if you're enthusiastic about what you do and you're going to go out and use it every single day and see everybody out there, that's what makes it exciting and that's what makes it fun.
And just before you put this in the comments, I'm sure Mark knows this and we can speak to it, but Acura did go bankrupt basically, but this is a new ownership
group. That was previous ownership. They went bankrupt a few years ago, and basically our company bought them out of bankruptcy. So it's all new people, except we did grab some of the engineering people and stuff like that. But this is all new ownership and all enthusiast-based ownership.
Are you having fun?
Oh, it's a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I love the car market too. I've always been. I mean, I love cars as well. I love doing the Mercedes yesterday. That was really cool. So I think to me, it's just the 2 things. You got the car, you got the off-road. It's like the perfect job, a perfect place to be.
Yeah, unfortunately, you live in Florida where there's not a lot of, there's mudding in Florida, I believe, right?
There is.
Because I think in Naples they do that like swamp buggy racing.
And it's a blast to watch. If you ever get down there, you got to go check it out. It's the funnest thing ever.
My mom lives down on Marco, and I'm always down there, but never during the racing because I think it's only like once a year. Right?
It is.
Yeah.
Yep,
have
exactly.
you seen it actually?
I have. I love it. It's the best thing ever.
What I'm talking about are these specially built vehicles, and they have basically, well, it's not even a swamp. It's like it looks like a small lake, right?
It's true. It's like a big mud pit.
It's like a big mud pit, and they have these super tall,
like 6-foot wheels and tires. Yeah.
And then they race around this. Yeah, it's really
and they
cool.
really move, and they actually have hydrofoil fins on them, so they get up on the water. It's a blast to watch.
Yeah, it's unique to Florida.
Yeah, it's a great thing. I love doing that. And the good thing is Wheeling isn't that far away. I mean, we always have Kentucky. And then getting out to Moab and Colorado isn't that far of a drive.
Were you at the Easter Jeep Safari this year?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we went out and ran a lot of trails on the Easter Jeep.
And will it last? Well, air suspension? I mean,
It's going to last.
It's going to last.
Yep.
All right.
I mean, we carry a limited lifetime warranty on it anyway, but the suspension is going to last, and there's no
if an airbag goes out on you,
just give you another one.
Oh, that's nice.
I mean, it's not good. And the reason we say that is because it's not going to go bad.
Okay.
So it's really easy for us to put that as a warranty because we're not worried.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys. Come back next time when we'll, continue with these interesting conversations. Ciao.
Thanks, guys.